A foggy country road, not a car in sight, just silence, and then a faint sound. A child's cry echoes through the mist. No one answers. A little girl, barefoot and clutching a torn teddy bear, stands alone in the middle of the road, shivering. She's lost, scared, and completely alone, or so she thinks. Suddenly, shadows move in the distance. 6 large shapes emerge from the trees. They're fast, silent, powerful. German shepherds. Most would expect chaos, danger even. A child surrounded by a pack of dogs. It's every parent's worst nightmare. But what happens next is not what anyone expected. These dogs don't growl, they don't bite. Instead, they circle the little girl like trained guardians, forming a barrier of fur and instinct around her trembling body. Why? Who are they? Where did they come from? And how did they know this child was in danger? What begins as a terrifying scene quickly becomes something extraordinary. As rescue teams rush in, cameras rolling, the truth behind these mysterious German shepherds unfolds. One of them has a past that connects to something even deeper, a history of loyalty, a story of abandonment, and a bond that no one, no human, could ever explain. What you're about to see is real, heart-stopping, and emotional. It's a tale of instinct, courage, and the unspoken language between dogs and children. By the end of this story, you'll believe in miracles, because sometimes, when the world turns its back, a pack of forgotten heroes rises to protect the innocent. This is not just a rescue story, this is paw print story, and what happens next will shock you. The cry in the fog. The fog rolled in thick that morning, so thick it swallowed up the edges of the winding country road like a ghostly tide. It was the kind of morning that muffled sound, blurred shapes, and made even the most familiar places feel foreign. Trees stood like silent sentinels on either side of the road, their tall, skeletal branches vanishing into the mist above. No one should have been out there. Not at that hour, not in that place. But then came the sound. It was faint at first, a small broken wail carried by the fog like a lost bird's song, a cry unmistakably human, yet so soft it was easy to miss. But if you stood still, if you listened close enough, you could hear it again and again, a child's cry. Somewhere, deep in that lonely stretch between farmlands and forgotten woods, a little girl sat on the edge of the asphalt. Her knees were scraped and muddy. Her tiny fingers clutched a torn teddy bear by the neck. Her clothes were damp from morning dew, clinging to her like a second skin. Tears streamed down her red cheeks, mixing with the dirt that covered her face. Her name was Lily, though no one there to call it. 4 years old, lost, scared, alone. The road stretched ahead and behind like a ribbon of uncertainty. To Lily, it felt like the world had disappeared behind the fog. She'd followed a light, a butterfly maybe, something that had shimmered in the dark while her parents slept in their camper back at the forest's edge. It had seemed like a game at first, an adventure, but now the fun was gone. Now there was only fear. She sobbed louder now, hoping someone would hear. But the trees didn't move. The birds didn't call back. Even her teddy bear, once her brave protector, offered no comfort. Her cries pierced the silence again, bouncing off the mist and vanishing into nowhere. But somewhere beyond the trees, something heard her. Deep in the forest, paws stirred against wet leaves. Ears perked, noses lifted to the wind. They had been watching. A pack. Not of wolves, not of predators, but of German shepherds, 6 of them to be exact, tall, muscular, and alert. They moved like a shadow through the woods, weaving through underbrush with the grace of trained hunters. Each one was different. Some scarred, some limping ever so slightly, but all of them sharp-eyed and silent. Their coats shimmered in the thin light breaking through the fog, some black and tan, others pale and silver. And at the front of the pack walked Rexo, the alpha. His ears twitched with each distant sound, his muzzle lifting into the wind. He didn't need to speak. The pack followed without question. He had heard the cry. Rexo's steps quickened. The others moved with him. They weren't chasing prey. They were answering a call, the kind only certain creatures could hear, the kind that didn't come from the mouth, but from the soul. As the fog parted just slightly near the bend in the road, Lily looked up, her eyes, wide with fear and coated with tears, locked onto the shadows moving toward her. Shapes. Big shapes. Fast. She gasped and pulled her teddy bear close, trembling harder than before. She wanted to scream, but the sound caught in her throat. Her tiny heart thudded in her chest as the figures emerged from the mist. 6 powerful German shepherds stepping onto the road in a silent, commanding formation. They didn't bark. They didn't growl. They just stood there, watching her. To Lily, it was a scene out of a nightmare. She tried to scoot backward on her scraped knees, but the cold pavement offered no grip. Her foot slipped. She whimpered. "Please don't eat me," she whispered, burying her face in her bear's damp fur. But Rexo didn't move. He stood tall in the center, his golden brown eyes studying her every breath. Then slowly he stepped forward. Not fast, not threatening. His tail was still, neither wagging nor raised. His steps made no sound. He lowered, his head slightly as he came closer, his gaze steady and unreadable. And then he stopped, just a foot away from her. The other dogs fanned out around her, forming a perfect circle. One lay down behind her, another sat to her right. 2 others paced the edge of the road, their ears constantly turning, checking the silence beyond the trees. They weren't attacking her, they were protecting her. Lily peeked up. The fear in her eyes softened just a little. Rexo lowered himself to the ground and slowly rested his massive head on his front paws. He didn't take his eyes off her. His calm, steady presence said what no human words could. "You're not alone now." Lily didn't understand why, she didn't understand how, but something in her small heart recognized what she was feeling: safety. And then, in a move that no adult could ever explain, she reached out a trembling hand and touched his fur. It was warm, soft, alive. She let out a tiny sigh, not of fear, but relief. The fog still swirled around them. The road was still empty. But in that strange, silent stretch of morning, something unexplainable was happening. A child had been crying in the fog, and the forest had answered with protectors. The circle forms. The air remained still, heavy with fog, and yet everything around Lily felt transformed. Moments ago, she had been completely alone, terrified, shivering, and convinced no one would ever come. But now, she sat in the middle of a circle of living warmth and silent guardians. The pack of German shepherds didn't say a word, yet their message was clearer than any human language. They weren't going to leave her. Rexo, the largest and oldest, kept his head close to the ground, golden eyes scanning every movement in the distance. His ears moved independently, one always turned toward the child, the other tracking the silence beyond the trees. He wasn't just watching, he was commanding. Every subtle twitch of his body sent signals through the pack. To the left of Lily, a younger shepherd, one with a scar above her eye, sat alert, her tail gently brushing the child's ankle. She gave a low, comforting hum in her throat, almost like a lullaby. Lily turned and looked into her soft brown eyes. There was no fear in them, only concern. Lily wiped her nose with the back of her sleeve. Her tears had slowed, though her small body still trembled from cold and confusion. "Are you angels?" she asked softly, not really expecting an answer. The shepherd closest to her gave a single slow blink. Rexo didn't move. She tried to stand, but stumbled and dropped to her knees again, exhausted. It had been hours since she wandered away from the camper, and her legs were heavy with fatigue. Her hands scraped against the gravel as she steadied herself, and that was when she noticed it. One of the dogs had shifted closer and was now pressing gently against her side, steadying her with his weight. She leaned into him instinctively. The fog had not lifted. The road ahead was still empty, but the fear that had gripped her like a vice was slowly loosening. With every passing second, the circle around her became more than just a protective formation. It became a message, a living shield, a sign that even in the loneliest, scariest place, someone or something still cared. What Lily didn't know was that these dogs weren't wild. They were rescues. Years ago, a former K-9 officer named Officer Hayes had built a sanctuary deep in the woods nearby. After retiring from duty, Hayes had devoted his life to training and caring for dogs that had been abandoned, injured, or failed out of service programs. Rexo had been the first, his most loyal partner, and the heart of the pack. Hayes had a rule: every dog needs a mission. So he trained them to respond to cries, distant sirens, even the scent of fear. Some of the dogs had learned to detect heartbeats. Others could track the movement of a single footstep in a mile of dirt. And Rexo, he had a special gift. He could sense distress. When Lily cried out, even from miles away, Rexo heard it, and just like in his years of service, he responded. The pack followed, their mission clear. Back on the road, Lily's head drooped against the soft fur of the dog beside her. She didn't feel the cold anymore. She didn't notice the fog pressing in around them. Her breathing slowed. Her tiny fingers still clutched her teddy bear, but now her other hand rested on warm fur. Then a twig snapped in the trees. The entire pack shifted. In an instant, the calm broke. Rexo stood, silent but powerful. The others rose with him. The young dog next to Lily didn't move away from her. She pressed in closer, shielding her body with her own. The snapping sound came again, closer this time. Rexo let out a single low growl. It wasn't loud, but it carried weight, like thunder, rumbling deep beneath the earth. He stepped forward, placing himself between Lily and the source of the noise. The other dogs fanned out, forming a tighter, more defensive ring. Lily sat up, heart racing again. "Is someone there?" she whispered. The bushes rustled. Then a man's voice, pierced the fog. "Lily!" She froze. Her eyes widened. "Daddy!" Suddenly, footsteps pounded down the road, fast and frantic. Out of the mist burst a man with wild eyes and muddy boots. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. And when he saw the little girl sitting in the center of a ring of massive German shepherds, he stopped dead in his tracks. "Lily!" he shouted again, falling to his knees. But the pack didn't move. To the man, Michael Harper, Lily's father, the scene looked surreal. A child lost in the woods, now surrounded by dogs that looked like they belonged to a military unit. He didn't know whether to cry or run, but then Rexo stepped aside. Just a foot. Just enough. It was all the permission Michael needed. He rushed forward, scooped Lily into his arms, and held her so tightly she squeaked. Tears spilled down his cheeks. "I thought I lost you. I'm so sorry, baby. I should have watched you." Lily wrapped her arms around his neck. "It's okay, Daddy," she whispered. "The dogs found me." Michael looked up at the circle. The dogs still stood there, watching, breathing, silent, no barking, no growling, just presence. He didn't know where they came from, he didn't know how they knew, but deep down in the pit of his soul, he knew one thing for certain. These dogs had saved his daughter. He whispered, "Thank you." And with that, the pack turned. Rexo gave a short huff, and they vanished into the mist, disappearing the same way they came. No leashes, no humans, no sound, just ghosts with golden hearts fading into the forest, tracks in the trees. The fog had started to thin, just enough to reveal the tops of the trees, but the road behind Michael and Lily still lay draped in a soft, silvery veil. Lily clung to her father's chest, warm and safe at last, while her tiny heart began to slow its frightened rhythm. Michael held her like she might vanish again. He sat in the middle of the road, surrounded by broken silence and tireless trees. His eyes scanned the surroundings again and again, as if trying to grasp what had really happened. The pack of German shepherds that had saved his daughter. Where did they go? He stood slowly, lifting Lily with him. Her arms tightened around his neck. "Daddy," she whispered, "they left." "I know, baby," Michael said, brushing her hair back. "They were amazing." He turned in the direction the dogs had vanished into. The woods, dense and dark, where no man's voice had called them, no master had summoned them. Yet they moved with perfect discipline, like soldiers trained to guard life itself. But something caught Michael's eye. A trail. Not footprints exactly, but a pattern in the mud and fallen leaves, pushed aside by large paws. Several paths branched through the trees like braided threads, too organized, too deliberate to be wild. The dogs didn't scatter. They traveled together in a precise V formation. And in that moment, a question struck Michael so hard, it stole his breath. Where were they going? "Stay with me," he told Lily softly, setting her gently on a large flat rock nearby. "Just a second, sweetheart. Daddy wants to see something." Lily nodded sleepily. Her eyes followed him but remained calm. Something about the dog's protection still lingered in her body, like warmth after stepping in from a blizzard. Michael knelt at the edge of the woods. The tracks were clearer here. Deep paw imprints, a few tufts of fur clinging to thorny bushes. One of the shepherds had limped slightly. He remembered seeing it. The print was lighter, uneven, but none of them had made a sound. He placed his hand over one of the paw prints, still warm. His throat tightened. This pack had been trained. He knew it. He'd grown up around working dogs. These weren't strays or wild animals. They had formation, discipline, intention. But why were they out here, in this remote part of the country road, miles from any known shelter or station? And then he spotted it. A collar, just barely snagged on a branch, frayed but sturdy. He gently pulled it off the limb. It was old, leather, cracked and damp, but on the inside, a metal tag still shone faintly beneath a layer of grime. He wiped it against his shirt. Rexo. Michael froze. Rexo. He knew that name. Everyone in the Tri-County area had heard it. Rexo was the legendary K-9 unit, credited with over 50 rescues, trained under Officer Hayes, and once rumored to have pulled a child from a sinking car during a flood. Rexo had disappeared 5 years ago after Officer Hayes died in a house. Fire. Everyone assumed the dog had perished with him, or wandered off to live his final days alone. But now, Michael looked into the trees, his pulse racing. If Rexo was still alive, and leading a pack of other trained dogs, what was he doing? Who was caring for him? Was he working alone, rescuing more people? Why hadn't anyone seen him until now? He walked slowly back to Lily, the collar clutched in his hand. "Daddy?" she asked, noticing the odd look on his face. He crouched down and showed her the tag. "This belonged to the big dog who sat in front of you. His name's Rexo." She smiled softly. "He was the leader," Michael nodded. Yeah, he was." She pointed at the forest. "Are we going to find him?" Michael hesitated. Part of him wanted to grab his daughter and leave this eerie place behind. Take her back to safety, hug her for days, and never speak of this strange miracle again. But another part, a louder, wilder part, couldn't ignore the sense that something bigger was happening. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but someone should. Someone needs to find out what they're doing out there." Before he could say more, a vehicle engine rumbled in the distance. Red and blue lights pierced the thinning fog as a sheriff's SUV came into view. The officer inside stepped out quickly, eyes wide, as he saw the man and child on the roadside. "Michael." "Harper," he called out, "we got a call from your wife. You've been missing for hours." Michael raised a hand. "We're okay now. My daughter, she's safe." The officer rushed forward. "We've had the whole county out looking. You found her in the woods?" Michael looked down at Lily, who blinked sleepily, her hand still, clinging to the teddy bear. "No," he said. "She was found." The officer frowned. "What do you mean?" Michael paused for a moment, holding the collar tighter. "I mean, she was rescued by a ghost pack of dogs no one's seen in years." The officer stared at him, not sure whether to laugh or panic. Michael didn't try to explain further. Some things weren't meant to be explained, not yet, but as the SUV drove them back toward home, Lily nestled against his chest and whispered one final thing that he'd never forget. "Daddy. Rexo stayed long enough to know I was safe. That's why he left." Michael closed his eyes. And for the first time in what felt like forever, he believed. A whisper from the past. The SUV moved steadily along the winding country road. Michael sat in the back seat, his arms wrapped protectively around Lily, who had fallen asleep again, her head resting on his shoulder, her tiny fingers curled around the worn collar of the dog who had saved her life, Rexo. The leather felt almost sacred now. It wasn't just a collar anymore, it was a key. A whisper from the past, trying to tell a story no one had heard yet. Deputy Ramirez, a kind-eyed officer from the local station, glanced at Michael through the rearview mirror. "So, you're saying it was a dog pack that found her?" Michael nodded. "More than just any dogs. They were trained, organized. They didn't just protect her, they shielded her, like bodyguards." Ramirez whistled low. "That's wild." Michael stared out the window, his voice low. "The lead one, he had this collar. His name was Rexo." The SUV jerked slightly as the deputy did a double take. "Wait, Rexo? You mean Officer Hayes's dog? The hero K9? Michael lifted the collar. "Same one." "But that's impossible," Ramirez muttered. "He's been missing 5 years. They said he died in the fire." "I think that's what they wanted to believe," Michael said. "But someone, maybe something, kept him alive, and now he's saving people." They rode in silence for a while, the forest outside swaying like it was hiding 100 more secrets. The next morning, Michael stood in the police station lobby. He'd barely slept. Lily was resting safely at home now, tucked in under her mother's tearful gaze. But Michael couldn't let go of the mystery. He needed answers. "Officer Billings," he said, stepping up to the front desk. "You worked with Hayes, didn't you?" The older man looked up, startled by the name. "Hayes? Yeah, I did." "Why?" Michael placed the collar on the desk. "I think Rexo's alive." The man froze. His eyes dropped to the nameplate. "Good Lord," he whispered. He picked up the tag, turning it in his hands like he was holding a ghost. "Oh, where'd you find this?" Michael told him everything. The fog, the formation of dogs, the way they protected Lily, and how they disappeared into the trees like they'd been summoned by some greater calling. Officer Billings sat back heavily in his chair. "You know, after Hayes died, I went looking for Rexo myself. That dog wasn't just a partner, he was family." Michael leaned in. "What happened? Why didn't anyone find him?" Billings took a long breath. "Hayes and Rexo were on a joint case with federal investigators. It was hush, hush, lots of secrecy, something about a trafficking ring running through these woods. Rexo had found a trail that led beyond the state line. Hayes kept digging even when the case was closed. Then his house caught fire. The whole thing was ruled an accident." "But you didn't believe that," Michael said. Billings nodded. Slowly. "No. Hayes was careful, and Rexo was missing, not dead. I think someone wanted them both out of the picture." Michael's heart pounded. "Then Rexo survived and went rogue?" "More like he went vigilante," Billings said, voice low. "And maybe, just maybe, he's building something bigger, a pack." Later that day, Michael returned to the site on the road where Lily had been found. The fog had cleared. Sunlight painted long, golden beams through the trees. But the silence was just as heavy, like the forest was waiting. Michael stepped carefully between the trees, following the tracks again. The paw prints had faded, but the memory of them was fresh in his mind. Then he heard it, a soft, distant whine. He froze. It came again, faint, barely audible, but unmistakable. He moved carefully toward the sound, heart pounding, breath caught in his throat. His boots crunched over dead leaves. A branch snapped beneath his weight. Then he saw it, a small clearing littered with old wooden crates and tarps, rusted tools, tattered pieces of what looked like military-grade gear, and right in the center, a makeshift shelter built of branches, canvas, and clever design. It looked like a hidden base. Then movement. Michael ducked behind a tree just as a figure emerged, not a human, but another German shepherd, not Rexo, but younger, eyes alert, strong. It sniffed the air and paused. Michael didn't move. Then, a rustle in the leaves to the left, another dog, and then another, silent, organized, aware they weren't attacking, just watching, guarding. And in the shadows, just past the clearing, Michael saw something that made his breath catch, a plaque carved into the bark of an old oak. It read, "In memory of Hayes, we continue." Michael stepped forward slowly, his palms open, unthreatening. The dogs didn't growl. They simply made a path, and there, standing tall and proud beneath the tree, was Rexo, his eyes locked with Michael's. No barking, no running, just recognition, understanding, like Rexo was saying, "You've found us, but only because we let you." Michael's voice cracked. "Why, Rexo? Why are you still out here?" Rexo didn't move, but behind him, one of the crates opened slightly. Inside were maps, IDs, and case files, evidence perhaps of crimes still being fought. Rexo hadn't just survived, he'd built a legacy. And now, maybe, just maybe, he was inviting Michael into it. A pact in the shadows. The silence hung thick like a spell. Michael stood in the heart of the forest clearing, facing a pack of German shepherds that had silently stepped from the shadows. At the center stood Rexo, the once-lost K9 hero. His eyes burning with something deeper than recognition. It was purpose. The moment felt sacred. A warm breeze whispered through the trees as the sun shifted behind the clouds, casting a dappled light over the clearing. Every dog stood poised and still, as if awaiting a command. And yet, not one barked. Michael took a hesitant step forward, heart pounding. "Rexo! What is this?" He barely expected an answer. But Rexo slowly lowered his head, almost a bow, then turned and padded toward the largest crate beneath the tree. He nosed it open, papers spilled out, old files, reports, newspaper clippings. Michael knelt beside them, his fingers trembling as he sifted through the contents. He gasped. They were case files, names, locations, smuggling routes, photos of missing people, some circled, others marked with an X. It wasn't random. It was evidence, evidence someone didn't want found. "You've been collecting this," Michael whispered. "You've been working in the shadows." Behind him, the other dogs slowly began to sit, forming a quiet, respectful circle around him and Rexo, just like they had with Lily. It wasn't intimidation. It was ceremony, and in that sacred moment, Michael realized he'd been chosen. 2 hours later, Michael sat across from Officer Billings at the old diner off Route 7. The booth was dimly lit, the smell of coffee lingering in the air. Michael dropped the small pile of files onto the table between them. "I need your help," he said. Billings's eyes widened. "You found them?" Michael nodded. "Not just Rexo, a whole pack. And they've been tracking something big, something buried." Billings looked over the clippings, his face hardening. "I remember this girl, disappeared 3 years ago near Milltown. no leads. "She's on Rexo's wall," Michael said. "He's piecing it together, but he needs someone who can speak for him in the world." Billings looked up. "You want to bring this to the department?" "No," Michael said firmly. "Too risky. Not until we know who we can trust. Rexo's been off-grid for years. There's a reason. He doesn't trust the system anymore, and maybe he shouldn't." Billings leaned back, exhaling. "You're asking me to go rogue." "I'm asking you to finish what Hayes started," Michael said. "This isn't about rules anymore. This is about justice, the kind that wears fur and bleeds loyalty." Back in the forest that night, Michael returned with gear, blankets, a backpack, and a solar lamp. Rexo met him at the edge of the trees and led him deeper this time, not to the original clearing, but to another. One that felt older. It was sacred ground. There, Michael saw a stone marker, overgrown with moss, but etched with clear words. "We serve without question. We protect without chains." Rexo sat before it. Michael sat beside him. "Hayes trained you for the law, but now you're building something that lives beyond it," Michael said. Rexo blinked slowly, then turned to face the pack as they emerged. From the brush, one by one, young and old, some with scars, others with military-grade collars and patches half-torn. Rescued dogs, lost dogs, survivors, warriors. This wasn't a random pack. It was a coalition. Michael stood slowly. "You saved Lily. You protected her when no one else could. Whatever you're fighting now, I'm in." At that moment, one of the youngest dogs stepped forward. It carried something in its mouth, a small piece of cloth. Michael took it. It was a child's shirt, torn, dirty, stained with dried blood. But on the inside tag, the name was still legible, Ava G. Michael's breath caught. "I know this name," he whispered. "She went missing last month in the next county." Rexo growled softly, not in aggression, but in urgency. They weren't just guarding children, they were tracking them, hunting the ones who took them. And now they had a human ally to help tell the world. As the night deepened and stars blanketed the sky, Michael wrote in his journal by the light of the solar lamp. The pack was quiet, nestled around him in a protective arc. June 12th. "Today I made a pact with ghosts, not of the dead but of the forgotten. These dogs, these warriors, they've been working silently in the cracks of our world, and now I carry their voice." He looked up, gazing at the shadows that danced among the trees. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "we start exposing everything." Rexo sat tall by his side, silhouetted against the moon. Not as a pet, not even just as a partner, but as a commander. Of the unseen, Michael placed a hand on his back. "Let's bring them justice." A map of bones and betrayal. The morning mist curled through the trees like a secret being whispered by the forest itself. Michael stirred awake beneath the large pine, his body aching from the damp earth, but his resolve stronger than ever. Around him the pack slept in tight circles, their breath steady, unified. And at the outer edge of the grove, Rexo stood like a statue, still alert, watching the forest breathe. Michael rose, stretching, when something caught his eye. Near Rexo's feet, partially buried in the soft moss, was something white. At first, Michael thought it was a rock, but as he stepped closer, a sickening chill ran down his spine. It was a bone, clean, small, human. Michael knelt, gently brushing aside the earth. Another bone, and then another. Carefully arranged in a rough circle. Marker? No, a map. Suddenly, the entire grove came into view differently. Small mounds in the moss, carefully placed stones, charred sticks forming almost imperceptible patterns, and when Michael stepped back, he saw it, an outline, a map made from remains. It wasn't just tragic, it was strategic, a language written in sorrow, left for someone who could finally read it. Michael retrieved his sketchpad and began copying the layout. He traced the arc of the bones, marking each indentation where a rock or stick pointed like a compass. Rexo padded over and sat beside him, his breath steady, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "This is what you've been building, isn't it?" Michael whispered. "A trail they can't destroy, because they don't even know it exists." At the edge of the map, near a charred piece of wood, Michael found a symbol etched into the bark of a tree. A triangle. Inside it a circle, and beneath that, a slash. He froze. That was the emblem from the missing person cases, from the files Rexo had collected, a child trafficking ring, long rumored, never proven. But here it was, carved into the forest's skin, like a signature. "Rexo," Michael said, his voice shaking. "This is where they brought them. This forest was a drop zone." Rexo let out a low, mournful sound. Michael pressed his palm into the soil. No more. By midday, Officer Billings arrived with supplies, gear, trail cams, and an old forest ranger's map. Michael laid out his sketch beside it. Together, they matched the bone map to the topography. "There's a hollow here," Billings said, pointing at a depression in the terrain. "Used to be an old ranger station before the storm took it out," Michael nodded. "Look at how the bones fan out from that point. It's the center." Billings looked grim. "If that's the center, then this might be a burial zone." Michael's jaw tightened. "Then we need to find what they left behind." The pack stirred at his voice. One of the older shepherds, a grizzled male with a scar across his snout, approached and gently nudged Michael's hand. In his mouth was a half-rotted glove. Michael took it. "Where did you get this, boy?" The dog turned and began walking toward the east side of the grove. Michael and Billings followed, weaving through the brush. Then they saw it, a path, faint but present, flattened grass, broken branches. And halfway down, a trapdoor hidden beneath leaves. Billings stepped forward and wrenched it open. A staircase descended into the dark earth. "Jesus," he muttered. "They were using this place." Michael flicked on his flashlight. "Let's go." Inside, the air was stale and thick with mildew. The walls were lined with rusted hooks and cracked cages. Chains lay scattered across the dirt floor. Michael's heart sank. It was real. Every nightmare, every whisper. And in the back corner, a crate. Inside, they found a journal. The name inside. The cover, Linton Thomas Hayes. Michael's hands shook as he turned the brittle pages. "They thought killing me would end this, but I've taught the dogs to carry on. They're smarter than the men chasing them. If someone finds this, follow the map of bones, expose them, save the others." Michael looked to Rexo, who had silently entered behind him. The dogs stood tall, proud, loyal. Hayes had prepared them for this moment, even in death. Billings swallowed hard. This changes everything." Michael nodded. "Now we have proof. Now we show the world." But just as he said it, a crackling voice broke through Billings' walkie-talkie. "Unit 4, come in. We have movement near Sector 9. Someone's breached the old cabin line. Repeat, unidentified movement." Billings paled. "That's too close." Michael stood. "They're watching the site. They know someone's getting close." He looked at Rexo. "We need to move fast." Back in the forest, Michael gathered the dogs. "You've been patient. You've hunted. You've carried. The torch for your fallen commander." He held up Hayes's journal. "Now we fight back." The dogs responded with soft whines and quiet growls of agreement. Michael looked at Rexo, who slowly turned and barked once, sharp, clear, commanding. The pack moved. Every dog knew what to do. They scattered like shadows across the trees. Some took to the trails, others slipped into the underbrush, and a few disappeared toward the edges of the map, the burial ground. Billings grabbed the files and gear. "We'll leak this to the press. Get a task force ready. They can't silence us now." Michael turned back to the grove one last time. The bones, the stones, the silent map of the forgotten. "We're not just telling a story anymore," he said. "We're writing the final chapter, in teeth and truth." The silent army awakens. The forest held its breath. Branches trembled slightly with the movement of unseen paws. Leaves whispered secrets as they were disturbed by silent shadows. It wasn't the wind, it was the army. Michael stood at the edge of the grove, watching as the pack of German shepherds vanished one by one into the foliage, guided by instinct and something more, something deeper. These weren't just dogs anymore, they were messengers, soldiers, memory-bound guardians of the fallen. Beside him, Rexo stayed. The leader never left until his unit was in place. Michael placed a hand on the dog's broad neck. "Are you sure they'll know what to do?" Rexo didn't move, didn't blink, just stared forward. It was answer enough. They moved like ghosts. Each member of the pack had been trained for this long before Michael arrived, by the one who had vanished, their original handler, Lieutenant Thomas Hayes. His teachings had embedded patterns in their memory. He'd built a network of canines smarter and more synchronized than most human teams. Now they awoke. At the far west ridge, an older shepherd named Zara approached a rusted communications post, half swallowed by vines. She poured a series of stones under its base. A trapdoor popped open. Inside, a cache, military-grade flares, water purification tablets, field radios, all wrapped in plastic. Zara barked twice. A younger dog appeared and took one of the radios, in his mouth, vanishing into the woods. At the eastern creek line, two shepherds uncovered shallow graves. But these were not grim. They were storage, waterproof tubes containing maps, photographs, and coded messages, evidence. Buried for when someone like Michael might come. They had waited. Now they moved. Michael and Officer Billings gathered in. The old ranger station, now their impromptu operations center. The walls were lined with every document they'd collected, missing persons files, news clippings, strange symbols. And now, Hayes' journal, a makeshift war room. "The dogs are doing the sweeps," Michael said. "We'll triangulate the meeting point from the paths they're taking. That's where the ring will be operating next." Billings nodded, half impressed, half disbelieving. "It's like they were always a step ahead, like they knew someone would come." Michael's eyes were hard. Hayes knew he'd die. He trained them to wait, not attack, not reveal themselves. Wait until someone came who could finish what he started. Billings looked at the pictures on the wall. Innocent faces, children lost. "And now," Michael turned toward the forest window, "now we strike." Rexo trotted back into the cabin and dropped something at Michael's feet. It was a dog tag, not military. It was from a missing child. On the back was a name. Sophie Lane. Age, 8. Disappeared 2 years ago, and beneath her name, etched roughly with a sharp object, "Still here." Michael's breath caught. He looked to Rexo. "You think she's alive?" Rexo growled softly, something between sorrow and determination. "Then we're not just uncovering the past," Michael said. "We're rescuing the living." As night fell, signals came in from across the forest. The shepherds returned one by one, circling the cabin like sentries. Each brought something: evidence, lost items, scraps of clothing, or worse, signs of recent human activity. One dog carried a boot, new, large, and still muddy. Fresh tracks, fresh targets. "We don't have much time," Billings said. "They're preparing to move, or cover their tracks." "No," Michael replied. "They're preparing to run, but we'll make sure they don't." The shepherds all turned as if on cue. Silent, still, Rexo stepped forward. Michael knelt before him. "Lead us." Rexo barked once, and the forest roared to life. They moved. Quickly, the pack surrounding Michael and Billings like a shifting wall of fur and fangs, down winding paths, across hidden streams, through ravines so narrow even Michael had to crouch low. but the dogs navigated every inch with precision. They weren't chasing ghosts now, they were chasing men, and Michael could feel it, the end of the silence, the conclusion of a legacy. They reached the hollow at dawn, a clearing, abandoned, except for a dark, flat structure at the center, half buried beneath a blanket of moss and leaves. The shepherds halted all at once, waiting. Michael moved first. He lifted the tarp covering the entrance, revealing steel doors, scratched, worn, locked with heavy chains. Billings stepped up, snapping bolt cutters into place. Crack! The doors groaned. Open, inside, they found a large underground chamber, rows of empty cages, piles of stolen goods, shelves of labeled files. But at the far end of the room they found a small door. Rexo stepped forward and pawed it gently. Michael opened it slowly. Inside was a small lit chamber, and in it, a girl, eyes wide, wrapped in a torn blanket. Still breathing, Sophie Lane. The shepherds didn't bark. They didn't need to. Rexo walked slowly toward the child and sat in front of her, head tilted. She reached out. Her hand touched his muzzle. He stayed still, his eyes locked to hers. Then she smiled. Just a little. Doggy, she whispered. You came. Michael's heart shattered. He dropped to his knees, tears burning his eyes. We're here, Sophie. We're here. Above ground, sirens wailed in the distance. Billings had called it in. A full task force, cameras, medics, journalists. But the true warriors? They stood guard as the world arrived. Shepherds, proud, silent, resolute. The silent army had awakened, and the forest would never be silent again. Truth in the ashes. Dawn's light broke through the branches with a golden hue, gently warming the dew-covered leaves of the forest. But deep within Michael's chest, the warmth did little to fight the cold truth settling like ash in his lungs. They had rescued Sophie Lane, but the forest was still burning with questions. She sat wrapped in a thick wool blanket beside the ambulance, silent but alert. Her eyes followed Rexo's every move, his towering yet gentle presence giving her the only sense of security she'd known in years. Michael crouched next to her. You're safe now, he whispered. Sophie's lips moved, barely a breath. He told me someone would come. Michael's heart stuttered. Who? Who told you that? Her eyes lifted to his, deep pools that held too much pain for a child. The man with the limp. He fed me sometimes. Said he used to be a soldier. And that the dogs would find me. Michael sat back, stunned. To Hayes, he wasn't just a ghost in the dog's memory. He'd been here. He'd lived long enough to protect her and leave breadcrumbs for Michael to follow. Later that morning, a controlled team entered the underground bunker. Inside, they found folders, files, digital hard drives. But most damning of all, they found fire pits. Burnt logs, melted tags, and half-charred pages. Someone had tried to erase everything. Michael walked through the debris, Rexo by his side. A trail of blackened ash crunched beneath his boots. Then he saw it. A steel box, partially melted, locked, tight. He pried it open with a crowbar. Inside were photos, Polaroids, dozens of them, children, names, locations. And in the center, a single page from Hayes's journal, untouched by flame. Michael lifted it with trembling fingers. If you are reading this, then the forest has done its job. They will come to erase us. But the shepherds remember. Memory is stronger than fire. This network, they're not just abducting, they're trading, selling, and they've buried the truth under moss, leaves, and fear. You'll need the shepherds. Only they can navigate the old trails, the ones even time forgot. Find Sophie. She's the key. She remembers everything, and she deserves a world that remembers her back. T. Hayes, Michael sank to his knees. His fingers gripped the page as if it might vanish like smoke. Rexo sat quietly beside him, the ash collecting in his thick fur. The truth was here, not just in the documents. but in the silence, in the scars, in the breathless weeping quiet of a forest that had long held its pain beneath the roots, and now the world would know. A week later the press descended, drones flew overhead. Reporters trampled mossy soil. Questions flew like hornets, some sincere, some just hungry for headlines. But the shepherds didn't care. They stood like statues, silent sentinels guarding the past. Sophie stood at the podium, holding Michael's hand. Her voice trembled, but she spoke. I was taken, but I wasn't alone. They wanted to make me forget, but I couldn't, because of him. She turned to Rexo. The crowd quieted. She knelt beside him. He remembered me when no one else did. Gasps rippled through the media. Cameras zoomed in. Headlines were born in that instant. But the moment wasn't for them. It was for Sophie, for Rexo, for the ghosts still waiting beneath forgotten roots. Michael and Billings later met in the ranger station, now turned into an investigation headquarters. "We got them," Billings said. 5 of them, high up, international. It's going global now. What we found, it's blowing open everything. Michael nodded. But how many more are out there? Billings was silent. They used the forest because no one looked here, Michael added. Because no one listened. He turned to Rexo. But you listened. All of you. Rexo looked back with soft amber eyes that seemed to speak. We always do. That night, under the stars, the shepherds gathered at the clearing again, not as warriors, but as a family. Michael sat among them, a small fire crackling nearby. Sophie nestled beside Rexo, her head resting against his shoulder. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Michael reached into his jacket and pulled out the last journal page. He read it aloud by the firelight. The dogs listened, as if Hayes himself was speaking through Michael's lips. One day they will come and thank you. They will say the world is safer because of what you did. But the truth is, you never did it for the world. You did it for one child, and that was enough. The fire burned down to embers. The truth had come from the ashes, not just of a bunker, but of forgotten hope. A signal in the sky. The sky had turned a strange shade of steel, clouds bruised with the promise of rain, but refusing to fall. The trees, once whispering in quiet solidarity, stood eerily still. There was something waiting. Michael stood on the fire tower, binoculars pressed to his face, scanning the horizon. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the ache of knowing that something bigger was coming. The arrests last week hadn't been the end. They were just the beginning. At his feet, Rexo sat watchfully. The old German shepherd had barely slept since Sophie's rescue. He wasn't just guarding the forest, he was guarding memory, and the memory was still screaming beneath the surface. A faint rustle came from the walkie-talkie. Station 9 to Ranger Michael. "You seeing this?" He pressed the receiver. "Go ahead. Northwest quadrant." Sky just lit up. "You might want to take a look." Michael turned his gaze. Then he froze. There, breaking through the thick layer of storm clouds, was a column of bright orange light. Not lightning, not fire, but a flare, high, controlled, and deliberate. Someone was sending a signal. "Billings," he said into the radio, urgency creeping into his voice. "I think someone else is out there, sending distress." Another pause crackled through the line. Then Billings replied, his tone grim. "Then we better go find them." 2 hours later, Michael, Rexo, and a team of 3 rangers hiked through dense brush toward the flare site. Every step was layered with the weight of uncertainty. The forest here was less familiar, marred with uprooted trunks, thorns thick like wire, and clawed rocks. It felt forgotten, like a place people had tried to erase. Rexo's nose twitched. He suddenly barked once, sharp, decisive, then veered left. Michael followed without hesitation, and there, tucked inside a collapsed hunting cabin with a rusted tin roof and broken chimney, was a child, a boy. No older than 8, skinny, dirt on his face, but alive. His eyes widened as the group approached. He scrambled back, terrified. Michael crouched low, holding up a hand. "Hey, you're okay. We're here to help." Rexo stepped forward, tail still, head bowed. The boy hesitated, then looked at the shepherd. His breathing calmed, his eyes locked onto Rexo's. Then came the words, soft and trembling. "You came back for me." Michael blinked. "What did you say?" The boy touched Rexo's fur. "The lady with the burn. Marks. She said if I waited, the big dog with the gold eyes would come, and he did." Michael felt his chest tighten. That meant there were more. Survivors, hidden, waiting. Back at the station, the boy, who gave his name as Caleb, shared everything. He could. "They kept us underground most of the time. We were supposed to forget the sun," she said, "the scary one with the cane." She said people forget kids faster in the dark. Sophie, sitting nearby, went pale. She knew the voice. "It's her," she whispered. "They called her the Night." "Mother!" Billings slammed his fist against the desk. "She was never caught." Michael stood in silence. The flare, the child, the whispers from the bunker. This wasn't over. It had just gone deeper. Later that evening, Michael found a quiet spot behind the ranger station, staring up at the sky. He couldn't stop thinking about the flare. Who had sent it? How did they know exactly where to aim it? Just as he stood to head inside, Rexo barked once, loud and clear. Michael turned. Another flare, this time in the southern sky, and this time it wasn't orange, it was red. Rexo growled low, not in fear, but in recognition. Michael's pulse raced. "It's a code," he murmured. "They're using flares to speak." Suddenly, a realization hit him. The journal Hayes left, the scattered trail, the cryptic page Sophie found with coordinates and dates scribbled in pencil. What if they weren't just journal entries? What if they were a map of signals? Back inside, the entire team gathered. Sophie, Caleb, Billings, and 3 shepherds, now recovered and assisting. Michael unrolled a map of the region. He marked the 2 flare points, northwest and south, then drew lines connecting them. Sophie pointed. "That's where the forest burned 5 years ago, near Old Hollow." Caleb whispered, "I heard them." "Talk about Hollow. Said it was the last gate before the window." Billings raised a brow. "Window?" Michael nodded slowly. "Could be an exit point, or a final sight." He looked around the room. "These signals aren't random. Someone is out there, risking everything to guide us. And if we don't act fast, they'll either be silenced or, worse, taken again." Night fell. The wind howled like distant wolves. But in the ranger tower, a silent promise echoed between man and dog, child and truth. The shepherds were not finished. The forest still remembered, and now the sky did too. The window opens. The wind carried a strange scent that morning, like scorched earth mixed with wildflowers. The kind of scent that didn't belong together. It was as if the forest couldn't decide whether to grieve or to grow. Michael stood at the edge of a jagged cliffside near the southern sector, binoculars in hand. He had barely slept. The red flare from the night before had haunted him. It wasn't just a distress signal. It was a call, a message only the ones who remembered would understand. At his side, Rexo growled low. Michael's grip on the binoculars tightened. There it was, nestled deep within the broken ridge, a cave masked by shadows and thorn vines. It didn't appear on the ranger maps. That alone was reason to be suspicious. But what made it chilling was something Caleb had whispered the night before. "The window isn't glass. It's a door you don't come back from." They assembled the team. Sophie, still bruised but resolute. Billings, tired yet angry. Caleb, now clinging to Rexo like a lifeline. 3 more German shepherds, strong, alert, and surprisingly synchronized, followed without hesitation. One of them, a younger female named Echo, had taken to Caleb like he was her own pup. "Locked and loaded?" Billings muttered, holding up a flare gun. Michael nodded. We only fire if it gets dark too fast. Sophie looked at him. You think it'll happen again? I think we've only scratched the surface of what they buried here. The descent into the canyon was slow and cautious. Every step forward was like stepping back in time. Vines coiled like veins around stones. Burned trees stood like silent sentinels. They reached the cave mouth by noon. The air grew cooler, not naturally but unnaturally. Like something inside was pulling heat inward, Echo whimpered. Michael paused. If anyone wants to back out, this is the time. No one moved. Rexo stepped forward. Into the cave they went. The light faded quickly. Flashlights clicked on. Shadows danced against jagged stone. After 20 minutes of careful movement, they came upon the first marking, a symbol etched in ash on the wall. A circle split by a vertical line, like an eye halfway closed. Sophie froze. That's the mark from Hayes's journal. Michael studied it. Then we're close. As they walked further, the path widened into a chamber. The ground here was smoother, almost tiled. Rexo barked sharply once. At the far end of the chamber stood a metal door, camouflaged to look like stone. No handles, no hinges. Just a small square indent, about the size of a dog's paw. Caleb was the first to speak. They called it the window because once it opens, secrets pour out like light. He stepped forward, but Echo blocked him gently. Then, without prompting, Rexo padded up to the indent, pressed his paw into it. A low hum vibrated through the ground, and the door slowly began to slide open. Behind it was not what they expected. No cages, no weapons. Instead, a vast circular room glowing with bioluminescent fungi, the walls etched with drawings, carvings, and what looked like old blueprints. In the center stood a tree, gnarled and dead, yet impossibly rooted in stone. At its base lay a pile of bones, small, delicate, human. Sophie covered her mouth. Michael knelt down. Among the bones was a small wooden tag, burned into it. Project Shepherd. Billings whispered, "This wasn't just a prison. It was a lab," Sophie said. "And that tree," Caleb stepped forward. "They said it was planted by the first girl who escaped. She came back here and died waiting for the next child to be free." Suddenly Rexo lifted his head. A soft growl rumbled in his throat. A hidden wall began to tremble. From it emerged a woman. She was older, wrapped in a tattered ranger coat, face lined with years of hiding. But her eyes, they were fire. "You made it," she said. "I've been watching, waiting for the shepherds to return." Sophie stepped forward. "Who are you?" The woman looked at Caleb. "I'm the one who sent the flare." She pointed to the tree. "This is the heart of it all. The window isn't just a door, it's a mirror. It reflects who we are when no one watches. These children, these dogs, they were not just survivors, they were evidence." Michael's voice cracked. "Evidence of what?" "Of how easily people forget." She paused. "Until the pack remembers for them." Suddenly, an explosion shook the earth above. Dust fell from the cave ceiling. Billings shouted, "They found us!" The woman turned. "You must go. Take Caleb. Take what you've seen. Let the world know that Project Shepherd never ended. It just went underground." Michael grabbed her arm. "Come with us." She smiled faintly. "My time ended when the flares began." Rexo barked. The other shepherds took defensive positions. The cave's exit was no longer safe. But the wall behind the glowing fungi shifted open to reveal a tunnel, a way out. They ran. As they emerged into the light, the cave behind them collapsed with a thunderous roar. The forest swallowed the window once again, but the story would not stay buried. That night, under a sky smeared with stars, Michael recorded a new entry in the ranger logs. "The window opened. We looked inside. We found more than pain. We found truth. And we will never stop sharing it." Caleb lay curled beside Echo. Sophie stood in silence, watching the moon. And Rexo. He stared at the horizon, as if waiting for one last flare to finish the message. The one who remembers. The wind had changed. It no longer carried the scent of smoke or sorrow. Instead, it carried the weight of silence, a deep, aching kind that settles over you like a memory you can't shake. Caleb sat beneath the old cedar tree, his knees hugged to his chest, Echo curled beside him. Her steady breath soothed his racing heart. Across the field, Rexo paced in slow circles. The others, Michael, Sophie, and Billings, had gone to scout the perimeter, but Caleb had stayed behind, watching the clouds swirl above the treetops. Like ghosts looking for a home. He couldn't stop thinking about her, the woman in the cave. "I've been waiting for the shepherds to return." Those words hadn't been meant for Michael or Sophie. They were meant for him. Rexo paused his pacing and trotted to Caleb. His powerful form sat beside the boy, eyes scanning the distance, ears perked. "I know you remember," Caleb whispered, his voice cracking. "You were there." The dog didn't move, but Caleb saw it in his eyes. Something deep, something ancient, not in years, but in experience. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the wooden tag they had taken from the cave. Project Shepherd. On the back, nearly invisible, was a carved number. 45019. Caleb didn't know what it meant, but it meant something, and maybe, just maybe, he was the one who had to figure it out. Night fell quickly, swallowing the trees in blue and black. Around the fire, Sophie whispered, "We have to take this public. Tell the world what we saw." Michael shook his head. "We don't have proof. Not enough. A collapsed cave, scorched maps, bones, they'll say it's a hoax." "But what about her?" Caleb asked. "The woman." "She stayed behind," Billings replied. "And with that cave gone, so is any chance of proving she was real." The fire popped. Echo lifted her head. Sophie glanced at Rexo. "Unless he remembers." Michael raised an eyebrow. "You think the dog can tell us something?" Caleb spoke softly. "Not tell, but lead." At first light, they began walking. No map, no plan, just trust in Rexo, who moved with determination deeper into the forest. They crossed streams, climbed mossy slopes, past ancient trees that whispered like old friends. Hours passed. Then suddenly, he stopped. Before them was a clearing, unlike any they had seen before. Wildflowers bloomed in perfect circles. A single stone bench sat at the center, weathered by time, but untouched by man. Rexo padded toward it, sat, and looked up. Carved into the bark of a nearby tree was a symbol, a circle, split by a line, just like the one in the cave. Caleb stepped forward. His fingers traced the bark gently. At the base of the tree was a small metal hatch, hidden beneath leaves and dirt. Billings pried it open with a crowbar. Inside, a tape recorder and a single cassette. They huddled close as Michael inserted the tape and hit play. The voice that crackled to life was unmistakable. It was her. "If you've found this, then they haven't silenced everything. My name is Commander Eliza Rames. Former lead on Project Shepherd. We were meant to build protectors, not prisoners. They lied to us, said the dogs were defective, that the children couldn't be saved. But the dogs remembered them, carried their names, their scars. And one day, one of the children returned, not as a victim, but as a spark. He was no more than 4 years old, and he remembered everything." Caleb's breath caught. "They tried to erase his identity, wipe his number, but they failed. I hid him in the forest, gave him to the shepherds, and if he's hearing this now, then he survived. His number was 04019. Everyone turned slowly to look at Caleb. His hand trembled as he looked down at the tag. 4019. He dropped to his knees. I thought the nightmares were just dreams. I didn't know they were real." Echo nudged his shoulder gently. Sophie crouched beside him. "You didn't just survive, Caleb. You came back." Michael stared at the cassette player. "They'll never believe this." "They don't have to believe it," Sophie replied. "They just have to hear it." Billings, unusually quiet, reached into his backpack and pulled out a satellite transmitter. "Found it in the old ranger station last week. Still works?" Michael blinked. "You serious?" Billings nodded. "Let's give the world something they can't unhear." They hooked the recorder into the transmitter. As the tape replayed Eliza's voice, the message was broadcast across emergency channels. Military, rescue, civilian. The truth, unleashed like a storm. By sunset, helicopters were circling overhead. But Caleb no longer feared the sound. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a flare, lit by the past, carried forward by dogs who never forgot. And Rexo? He lay at Caleb's feet, eyes closed, the faintest smile on his face, because he remembered too, not just the pain, but the promise. The pact made in silence, that one day the child would return, and when he did, the shepherds would rise. Where the truth howls, the night sky burned with searchlights. Helicopters hovered like silent giants over the forest clearing. The wind carried the echo of engines and the sharp tension of something about to break. Caleb stood in the middle of it all, eyes closed, heart pounding, not as a lost boy anymore, but as the key to a truth buried too long. Beside him sat Echo and Rexo, still and alert like twin guardians from an ancient myth. Around them, the other shepherds had quietly returned from the trees, more than a dozen of them, surrounding the clearing like a living wall of loyalty. The pack had formed again. A voice crackled through the radio. "Stand by, ground team approaching." From the edge of the woods, boots crunched on twigs. Men in black stepped out, heavy with gear, weapons drawn. Michael, Sophie, and Billings stepped protectively in front of Caleb, but the shepherds didn't growl. They didn't attack. They stood, calm, ready. One man stepped forward, older, worn, a captain maybe. He scanned the group and said, "We've been looking for this place." "For years." Sophie narrowed her eyes. "Looking or covering up?" The man didn't blink. "Both." Suddenly, the satellite transmitter beeped again. Another frequency had picked up the broadcast and was responding. A woman's voice, aged but clear, came through. "Commander Eliza Rames is not dead." The clearing froze. "I faked the cave-in. I stayed hidden, and I've waited until one of them returned." "The boy. 4019. You made it." Caleb choked back a cry. "Yes, I remember now." Eliza's voice softened. "Then you know what must be done." The captain knelt. "I was there. I tried to stop it too, but they erased all of us." He reached into his jacket. Everyone tensed until he slowly pulled out a dog tag, not military, not standard issue. It had a number, Jazazu 401. "I was the first," he whispered. "I wasn't a soldier. I was a child, just like you." The shepherds stirred. Echo barked once, sharp and clear. Then Rexo let out a deep, haunting howl. One by one, the others joined in until the entire forest seemed to pulse with sound. The howl rose, layered with sorrow, memory, and something powerful. Truth. The helicopters backed off. The men lowered their weapons, and the captain stood tall. "Let them know. This ends tonight." They walked out of the forest at dawn, the shepherds flanking them like warriors from legend. Reporters swarmed the perimeter. Cameras rolled. The story spilled like a flood. Project Shepherd, the hidden children, the erased experiments, the silent pact between man and dog. And in every broadcast, one face stood out. Caleb, a boy once found. Crying on the road, now standing before the world, surrounded by the protectors who never gave up on him. Later, at a quiet press conference, Caleb stood at the podium. "I don't remember everything, but I remember enough." He looked down at Echo, who nudged his leg softly. "I remember that they tried to take my voice. But the dogs, they remembered for me. They guarded my past, until I could return and speak it." Sophie stepped beside him, eyes full of tears. And now they guard the future. In the days that followed, survivors stepped forward. Other, numbered children, retired handlers who had stayed silent out of fear. DNA confirmed Caleb's identity, and the world listened. Laws were passed, old leaders were arrested, and the shepherds, they weren't just seen as dogs anymore. They were recognized as heroes. Rexo was given a special medal for bravery. Echo was offered a permanent home with Caleb. But Caleb had other plans. "We're building a sanctuary," he told the reporters, "not just for dogs, for survivors, for truth." And it was built at the very edge of the same forest where it had all started. Named the Rame Sanctuary after the woman who risked everything. Years passed. Caleb grew taller, wiser, stronger. Echo never left his side. And every year, on the anniversary of their walk out of the woods, Caleb would return to the stone bench in the hidden clearing. Rexo, now older, would lie beside him, and Caleb would whisper, "I remember." The howl would rise again, echoing through the trees, and somewhere, deep in the hearts of all who listened, the truth would never be silenced again. Thank you for watching. This story was brought to you by Paw Print Story. If it touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share. And remember, some heroes walk on 4 legs.